Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well and enjoying your Memorial Day weekend. That is, of course, if you are here in the U.S. Because, hey, well, you know what? It's the beginning of summer, which, I'm always hoping that it's going to mean some great barbecues and some great outdoor whiskey sipping and maybe some campfires and the opportunity to spend time with friends and family. That's always exciting for, especially now after all the pandemic and all that kind of craziness. Now, there's also a couple updates I want to do. First, if you have not noticed as of yet, I got a new mic. Yay! Right? So hopefully it'll improve the sound quality for you all and make the videos a bit more enjoyable and not cut out some of the bass on it. And I got to figure out how to get that NPR filter so I can be like talking like this and stuff like that. But I got a new mic. I'm super excited about it. This is the first one we're going to do with it on there. So let me know how that sounds. And then also an update to the format. So for those folks who just want to see the Costco alcohol section, so they just kind of want to see everything that's at this Costco at the time that I went, I'm actually going to put the video up, a separate video up with no commentary, just the actual wander around the Costco showing all the different prices and the different costs of alcohol and show all the different ones that we saw in this trip. So just heads up on that. That's going to be coming out after this one gets published. Now, today I'm in a Costco in Vista, California, which actually is a pretty good selection and oftentimes has whiskeys that are almost always sold out at other Costcos. So they just seem to, I don't really know why, but they seem to sell out a lot slower, or maybe just a little bit slower than in the other parts of the state and the other parts of the county. So whenever I'm in North County, San Diego, I usually end up going to this one as well as the Costco in Carlsbad. And in this Whiskey Wander, we see a new whiskey, kind of a relatively new whiskey entrant into the whiskey world, which is Old Elk, as well as two 25-year-old whiskeys, the Glenlivet 25, as well as the Glengoyne 25, which both seem pretty interesting, to say the least. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about the whiskeys. I'm going to do a price comparison between the Costco price and some of the street shelf prices or prices at Total Wine or at Bevmo, if we can find them. And then we're going to go over some of the reviews and whether or not you should actually consider buying them or not. Now, of course, as before we get to any of this, first of all, I just want to say thank you all so much for watching these videos. It's really great to have you all to be a part of this small but growing community of whiskey lovers. And, I hope that you really enjoy these videos. But if you do, you know what? Please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when my newest videos get put up. All right, everybody, so let's get started with this first whiskey that kind of piqued my interest on this trip to Costco, which is this Old Elk, which is relatively a new entrant into the whiskey arena. It's distilled by Greg Mez from MGP Whiskey in Indiana, and then is bottled and aged and proofed by Old Elk out of their facilities in Colorado. So I guess what that means is at the moment, they actually are not producing the whiskey on their own, so they're not distilling it, but they will get it shipped in from MGP to their facilities in Colorado, which allows them to kind of change things around. But eventually, as I read on their website, they do look like they're building out their own factory so they can distill and have the whole process in-house, but it's just not there at the moment. Currently, the Old Elk has a mash bill of 51% corn, 34% malted barley, and 15% rye, and the whiskey is aged at least a minimum of 5 years once it reaches the Colorado facility. And on the website, their big thing that they're really kind of advertising on this is that they have a slow proofing process where they slow down the process of cutting down the alcohol content on the whiskey, which I guess takes rather weeks than normally, like how it normally takes days. And according to them, this causes the whiskey to be smoother and richer and better flavored. Of course, you gotta always take these things with a grain of salt because it definitely sounds like some marketing embellishment if I've ever heard it. Now, the price that we see here at Costco on the Old Elk is at $29.97. And of course, this is going to be in comparison to what you would find in other places like at Bevmo or Total Wine. And in fact, Bevmo is way higher at $69.99. And also you could find it at Total Wine for as low as $39.99. So that means that if you do end up buying it at Costco, you'll be saving around $10 in cash over the Total Wine price, which is the lower one, or that comes out to around 18.22%. Now, the ABV on the Old Elk is at 44%, which means that it is on the lower side of the mid-range of ABV for whiskeys. And the toasting notes on it mention that it has a medium mouthfeel, flavors of cocoa, sweet cream, toffee, and there is not an ethanol taste at all. Now, the reviews also give it a pretty respectable 85.5 points, with most of the scores in the reviews being in the low to mid 80s. So, I mean, that's kind of what you would expect. And so, basically, in conclusion, on this trip, I actually ended up skipping this one. And at the time, I didn't really have a great reason for it. I think it's just more the fact that this one, it seems to be yet like another sort of new-aged whiskey, like the ones that are coming out of places like Oregon and Colorado and California and a lot of western states, and I think Vermont too, that I imagine they are probably really good, but are trying to make a new take on whiskey. And for me, I'm just in that stage of whiskey development where I'm just trying to first understand the old masters first, those traditional kind of Kentucky bourbons, before I start getting into the Picassos and the Pollocks of the modern and current era of whiskey. So for me, it was a skip, but I think that it will probably end up on the whiskey shelf at home, just kind of in a matter of time. Now, the next whiskey I want to talk about is actually one that is one of the old master type whiskeys, and that's been around for a long time. It doesn't need much introduction, which is this Glenlivet 25, which, I mean, I always seem to confuse it with the Glenfiddich, just because they sort of sound the same, and they have similar labeling on the bottles. In fact, they're also from the same area of Scotland, sort of, the Speyside, so it's easy to see how they could be confused. But either way, Glenlivet 25 is the quarter-century rendition of the famed whiskey. It is obviously, 25 years old, and is aged in Oloroso sherry casks, and I guess finished for the last 2 years. So they are finished the last 2 years in the Oloroso sherry casks, and then for the first 23 years, it's stored in American white oak barrels, and then moved to the sherry casks for those last 2 years. It's distilled in pot stills and is made from 100% malted barley. Now, Glenlivet has been run almost continuously since 1824, and actually only had its only shut down during the World War II era. So other than that, it's been open for the entirety of, since 1824. And Glenlivet as a whole is the biggest single malt whiskey brand sold in the United States, and the second biggest single malt brand sold in the world. So that's just a little bit of background on the Glenlivet. Now, this Glenlivet 25 specifically at Costco is set at a price of $379, which puts it, it kind of puts it in a pretty competitive weight class. But the nice thing about the Glenlivet is that they have many, 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 many levels of scotch that you can get. So, you don't have to start at the top. You can go through the full family line. And of course, if you like it, you have a pretty long runway of whiskeys that you can kind of work your way up to the higher end instead of having to jump right in on this one. So like the Little Mill, for example, tends to only have really expensive ones because it's limited and there's not much. So you don't really have an opportunity to try it out that much. But this one, you can. Now, the $379 is actually a pretty good price in comparison to what you can find in other places, where I've seen the cost as high as $549.99, and that's kind of at just a random liquor store, but also as low as $449.99 on the low side if you can find it at Total Wine and More. That means if you do end up buying it at Costco, you'd actually save around $70 over the Total Wine price, which comes out to 14.69% in difference between Total Wine and Costco. Now, the ABV on this one is a little bit underwhelming. So it's set at 43%, which, I would expect it to be a bit higher for such a kind of older whiskey. But the tasting notes do mention that there is no heat on this one, which would make sense having such a low ABV. It has a thin mouthfeel, but is rich in flavors like toffee, blackberry, black cherry, tobacco, and is sweet and musty. Just like me. Just kidding. Now, the review scores have been pretty good, but sort of what you would expect from a nearly $400 bottle of whiskey. It got a score at 91.67 points out of 100. So, it's good, but, for $400, it's what you would expect. And for me, this is another one that I am probably going to skip. Not really because of any issues with Glenlivet. It's just that I've tried the Glenlivet, the lower levels of the Glenlivet, and I've just never been found wanting of a better, smoother, more refined version of it. So I guess in short, you know what, Glenlivet, it's not so much you, it's really just me. It's just something, personally, I don't know if I want to spend my money on, but it's probably still very good. Okay, so this last whiskey is one that seems to have a very wide width and breadth of age statements and types available, primarily at Costco, I think. It's the Glengoyne 25. Now, the Glengoyne has been distilled since 1833 and is based out of Glengoyne in North Scotland. And I've seen it referred to as the most beautiful distillery in Scotland, which to me, if I've ever heard it, it sounds like damning with faint praises. It's basically the distillery equivalent of it has a great personality for Scotch makers. But the Highland Single Malt, which is matured in the lowlands, so I guess maybe the elevation probably makes some sort of difference somehow. They use unpeated malt to create the whiskey and mature in sherry casks as well. The 25-year-old version of this was initially introduced in 2014, and they claim that they use a slow distillation process, actually the slowest distillation process in Scotland, and don't use any chill filter in the process. So, I mean, I don't know. I wonder if how fast you distill something really has much of an effect on the flavor or the texture or the quality, or like, the slowest proofing like we just talked about with the Old Elk, if it's more of a gimmick than just, something that actually makes it better. So I don't know. I don't really know what that matters, but, I guess it sounds pretty good. Now, anyway, the Glengoyne 25 has a price here at Costco at $449, which is still going to be the lowest that I found out of the major whiskey shops that I've looked at, especially when compared to like Total Wine, who actually has an unusually high cost at $649.99. But the lowest that I found outside of Costco is at a local wine liquor store here in LA, where it's set at $549.99. So that means if you do end up buying the Glengoyne 25 at Costco, you'll be saving a whopping $100 or 16.16% over the local liquor store, which is, still a pretty good savings. Now, the ABV on or the alcohol by volume content on it on Glengoyne is at 48%, which is pretty good considering its age. And I guess you would call it age appropriate for something that's 25 years or older. And the tasting notes on it mention that it is thick, velvety, smooth, and has flavors of winter stewed fruits, marmalade, some tannins, and a well-balanced of spice, which, honestly, it sounds pretty good. Now, the reviews gave it a 92.21 points, which, of course, is a good score, but again, it's about par for what you expect for a whiskey that's $500 for a bottle. And in conclusion, this is yet another one that I skipped during, these kind of, when I saw it when I was wandering around, I skipped it primarily because there was something that just kind of turned me off about the labeling and the marketing and the availability. I don't know, just something that I saw about it just didn't, tickle my fancy. But you know what? After looking around and doing some Googling and looking at the information that's available for it, it seems like they actually have some pretty high quality whiskeys that Glengoyne produces, and they have some interesting nuances of the type of barley and the history and all that kind of stuff. So I think I'm going to reconsider this one and maybe start with the Glengoyne 18. I think I've seen that one, or I don't know if they have a 12, but I've definitely seen the Glengoyne 18. See if that it kind of is something that I'm interested in. Try that, and then work my way up to the 25 and even higher. I think I've even seen 50 or something like that at Costco. So this one, in conclusion, was a not buy, but definitely going to keep it on my radar and figure out, try it out and see if it's something I want. All right, so that's it for today's Whiskey Wanders here in Vista, which is in San Diego, California. And of course, I want to say thank you all again to all of you who made it this far in the video, made it to the very end. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you can get updates when my newest videos get put up. Also remember, if you do see a whiskey that you love, just buy it. Because if you don't, somebody else surely will. And it might even be me. So have a great rest of your day. I'm out, and adios.